Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Resident Alien. A great episode, a lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we were picking up in the aftermath of last episode. We find out that the government faked Peter's death. I mean, granted, he did die at a government facility, so they made it seem like he died in like a car accident or something, but obviously she knows, well, something's not right. First and foremost, she saw Peter leave in his vehicle, yet somehow that vehicle is still came back to town, and Peter died in a completely different vehicle. Plus, she doesn't know who, but she knows someone was also in the car with Peter, so that's also an interesting element to it. Obviously, Mike thinks she's, a conspiracy theorist. Is like, right, when you go looking for something, you kind of, when you want to go looking for something, you're going to find it, essentially. Which she's like, yeah, she's like, yeah, the whole thing about you saying, like, the moon, he was even kind of implying like the moon's made of styrofoam. He's even like all the craters being the same depth. Fact is, you can't see the other side of the moon. They probably got an Arby's up there or something like that. Which I also love that Mike is also upset when he finds out from Ben that they are not getting. Well, he's always wanted the extra funding to do what he wanted to beef up the police at the sheriff's department in Patience anyway, but especially because he thought they were getting a resort. He's like, right, we need a hooker jail. He's like, well, no, they probably prefer sex worker jail. He's like, what was he was saying? Like, they would probably like prefer, that terminology than just like saying hooker jail. But yeah, Ben made his decision last episode that he wasn't going to be all about that resort. I did think it was interesting that it was like, wait, despite all that, because I felt like, okay, it was cathartic for you to be, it was supposed to be cathartic for you, like, oh, your sleepwalking had to be about the whole Kate thing, but it's like, he's still sleepwalking. I was like, wait, what? And then once again, my brain started rolling through the Rolodex of like theories of like, wait, because we know, like, obviously they talk about like, oh, half grays, half humans, and so I'm wondering, I'm like, could it be that Ben is one? Is that why they are taking like people and like their babies and stuff? Like Robert might himself be a gray human hybrid. Like, is that why they're grabbing humans to experiment on them or take some of their DNA to make half gray, half humanoids? Because that's the only way they're able to survive. As Harry puts it, it's like, oh, there's two basically scrawny to like exist on this planet on their own and live. So they have to do the whole half hybrid, half human thing. So that's why we have like Joseph, for example, which I love that, like, he's like the more serious version of Harry, because once again, it's kind of like Invader Zim, where it's kind of like, oh, Zim's like the idiot of his species, and it's like, oh, he thinks he's so great and stuff like that. It's like Harry's like that too. But like, I love that Joseph plays into his insanity when it's like, wait, don't text me, like, wait, you don't have my number. It's like, yeah, we have your number. It's like, well, how you do it? It's like, oh, well, we just, we make that happen. It's like, no, that you couldn't ask someone for my number and then get it. It's like, they wouldn't do it unless I said, yes, that person can have my number. It's like, how did you do it? And it's like, okay, that woman over there, it's like Ellen. I was like, oh, she's the absolute worst. I can't believe she did this because I keep stealing her food. It's like, well, why don't you put a lock on over there? He's like, yeah, but then it's complicated. They have to keep up with the key. And Joseph's like, yeah, I see a point there. I'm like, I love that he plays into the idiocracy of it all, and just like this back and forth. I love that. Like, I love that because it's in that situation that he's just kind of like the serious type that once again is still playing into the idiocracy of it all. I love it. I don't know whether that's just supposed to be like an alien thing, whatever the case may be. So I just thought that was interesting. And they were giving Harry an out. It's like, cool, know who you are. Here's an escape pod. You can leave this planet. We won't want to beef with you or your people. So, and especially for Harry, it's like, I know how this. He already knows how this is all going to end, and he had shown Asta the vision, and I love that we get the full message about it. Also, I'm you from the future. This is some crazy shit. I'm like, I love that. But Asta is able to see the vision as well. Like, that's why, and I thought that was interesting to be like, that's why he didn't kill, I thought he didn't kill McAllister because the baby asked him to. It's like, well, to be fair, it's like, it's because himself from the future, he's like, I killed McAllister, and that was my mistake. She has the necessary means. I mean, she's been probably building an arsenal to fight against an alien invasion, and she's probably the only one that's aware of where it is, or at the very least, she's probably the only one that has access to what we got a glimpse of at the end of the episode. She's probably the only one that has access to that, because it is probably like tied to her like signature, because like the door responded to her. So with her going, no one could get access to whatever's down there. So all of that's probably like her dying meant Harry never had that arsenal to basically help the human race fight back against the Greys. So that's kind of my thought process. But I was like, oh, so but you had extra reason for not killing McAllister. She might be the human race's only hope. But Harry's worried because he's like, the future is already kind of set in stone. I failed before, I'll fail again. Granted, things are different now. You know, obviously you have McAllister, which seems like she's the domino effect of changing everything. So, but I do love that Harry is kind of going on a goodbye tour, as he kind of puts it, as he says goodbye to Max. And it's like, oh, I gave you a picture of me as my human self. It's like, yeah, just so you know. He's like, oh, it's so good, isn't it? It's like, Max is like, yep, why are you doing this? You don't normally give me a gift. He's like, well, I'm leaving this planet. He's like, no, you're not. He's like, yeah, why wouldn't I be? It's like, you don't leave, you love me too much to leave. He's like, no, I don't. What are you talking about? And he's just like, right, and your artistic skills suck, I guess, because he was kind of hoping, was like, well, you know, he probably assumes, like, well, future me, like, had the whole art thing going on. It's like, well, that's a skill you practice. You had, some time to practice on it, and also being like, yeah, this doesn't look like you at all. He's like, what, are you calling me fat? That's my ideal body weight. He's like, I'm not fat, I'm thick. All bodies are beautiful, even you squirrel-necked dick, or something like that. I love it. And then, of course, we gotta get our sprinkle in Sahara as well. She's like, Max told me you found baby, and she's like, they having a little moment like that. He's like, oh my god, look at this door, it's open, you should probably like take your business elsewhere, or something like that. But it was this beautiful moment that they had where she's just kind of like proud to be like a mama, and she's like, oh, I even made you this plus you, and she's like, I even gave it a hijab just so you remind you of me. Goodbye, baby. And he's like, goodbye, mama. And I was like, that's actually really sweet. It's like, that little girl's too grown for her own good. I mean, it's like, you know, and just obviously like Harry doesn't like her even, but it's like, right, baby is the bridge between your species and mine, so you need to give him a name that reflects that. Which, hey, Harry goes with Bridget, which immediately makes me think of, I don't know, it just the whole bridge and connection, the connectivity of it all. It kind of makes me think of Death Stranding. It's just kind of what immediately popped in my mind because of that, calling him Bridget and stuff like that. Either way, I even love the whole thing of like, yeah, baby, he was like, yeah, I wanted to eat you at first, and he just keeps kissing him, kissing the top of Bridget's head and just licking his lips afterwards. I'm like, that's so twisted. But he's like, yeah, Goliath gave you the baby to me because I am different. Because he would have never cared about that baby, but he does now. He cares so much that he wants to protect the baby. That's why they're leaving. But for him, it's like, no, this is my chance. You know, I can do things differently. At the very least, he will try. So he sent the baby on the way, and the baby could be that in between, once again connecting those two worlds, and this baby being different. Hopefully it isn't a situation of now that Harry sent his baby back home, that there's not an issue that like, oh, your baby's going to come back maybe resentful. I mean, their species kind of does that anyway, kind of like leaves their children to kind of fend for themselves, but it's like maybe your child will come back at you know, an angsty teen, very like a la Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy type of situation, and kind of come back with a chip on his shoulder, and that could be a whole, you know, issue in itself. Or maybe like your people will change the baby from what they are into more like them and less a middle ground like Harry is. I do love that this episode is in fact all about connectivity and stuff, especially like the Mike and Liv stuff, which I love the whole thing of her being like, coming up with that super elaborate line, Mike being like, your lies have gotten super specific. Because she was like, yeah, this guy, like, me and this guy, and was it Ned picked up the truck instead? Then we went to dinner, and he thought it was a date. But I was like, I'm married, and he's like, but I'm married too. And it's like, him and his wife kind of have like a whole thing, and Mike didn't believe it. And he's like, you took the van. She's like, in fact, he's like, you stole the van. The fact is, you could get in serious trouble, so you need to turn that over. But she's like, no, I'm not. You might not believe me about this whole thing, but I'm not going to get the van back. So she's leaving. And he's like, right. Basically, he went on this whole diatribe about how he'd have to stick a knife up his ass. And he's like, that'll get very slicey because he needs to, in case they do a cavity search when he has to come and visit her in jail or something like that. But I do love that the moment the cops rolled up, I was like, that's weird. Because I knew something was off when they showed up. I'm like, why would they, how would they know this quickly? For one, that Liv took the vet. Why would they even be looking for it? Like, it was foreign, it was impatience, like, why would, and so I was like, uh-oh, they're looking for the van, and the moment the garage opens, there's Mike and Liv's husband, and it's like, oh, and the moment Mike asked that question about, like, oh yeah, like, you guys are from that place, right? Tell so-and-so in charge. I said, what's up? And they're like, yeah, sure, and that look on Mike's face, I was like, you're lying, because they're not actual cops. Because Mike looked at the CCTV, and the van showed up in town like 3 hours after Peter died, so he knows something's going on. So I don't think those are Grays. Those are probably McAllister's people just covering stuff up, trying to like get the van back. They don't want anything coming back to him. So it is alien related, but it's also government related. So it was just the government, McAllister in particular, like covering harassment because those weren't real agents. I am curious where David is too, because we haven't seen David in a couple episodes. So I wonder, was he brought back into the fold, or did McAllister let him go? She probably still has him on the outside just to make sure there are, because they don't know Joseph's an alien, but they know, like, right, there's a mole on the inside. I don't know if they necessarily know that he's an alien, but so, which I loved, really quickly, with the Liv stuff. I love that whole angle of the episode where everyone's giving their testimonials about seeing aliens. And I figured, I was like, all right, obviously the last one's going to be Liv, and it ended up being Liv. But at first I'm like, especially the first guy be like, yeah, I'm the CEO of Dark Horse Media. I'm like, and if you look in some of the credits, it's like, oh, so-and-so as himself. So I'm like, okay, so like all those people, I'm like, are they people actually? I wonder. I mean, I'm maybe reading. Like, I'm curious who they are. Like, I'm wondering, are they all people who work on the? Because I should have paid very, very close attention to some of those names. But like the guy who was like, oh, I'm the CEO, because his name was at the end of the credits as himself. So I was like, that's definitely got to be like the CEO of Dark Horse Comics, all right? Like, I was like, oh, that's actually really neat. I wonder the rest of the people, like, who gave their testimonials, are they people who work on the who work for Dark Horse Comics as well? I'm curious if that's who they are. I would assume that'd be kind of a nice little like wink and nod and cameo if that was the case. It'd be interesting if the person giving the interview is well, because I actually don't know the name of the people who make the artist or like writer for the original comic itself. Like, that could have been one of the people, and that could have been one or two of the people like during that as well. Could have been like the person giving the, I mean, for all we know, like Chris Sheridan, I think it's like the creator of the show, could be like one of the person giving the actual, like, filming the interviews and stuff like that. If that was like, it'd be interesting to kind of that way, like everyone kind of involved in this project in some shape or form, whether it's like on the comic front or the distribution front or just like making of the show front, like, got to be. I think that'd be kind of interesting. I mean, I thought that was pretty neat. Like I said, on the connection front, we have the whole Asta and Jay situation, where it's like there's like a formal or something that's coming up that Jay needs a dress for, and she's asking Asta, and Asta's like, no, Jay, I will be there, and she's like, I know you will. I'm like, I love that, dude. And even when Harry came back, she's like, Harry, I thought you were going to leave with the baby, go home. He's like, why would you think that? Asta, I was given a pod by the enemy and I'm going home with the baby. It's like, oh, well, no. he's like, I had to let the baby go, and he's like, this human connection. He's like, I know you and Jay will find your way back to each other. And I was like, I thought that was a really sweet, beautiful moment. And then we got the twist where Darcy found the stuff that killed Sam, and at first I was like, oh, is she gonna think Asta did? But she's like, no, she knows that Asta didn't do it, but she's like, oh, but Harry did, and you're protecting him. Because I'm sure the message on it probably, like, I didn't read the letter, but I'm sure it was like about probably meeting with Harry or whatever, or Harry meeting with Sam or whatever. And that's why she immediately was like, oh, you're protecting this guy. I was like, Harry's going to show her the truth, isn't he? And he does. And Darcy has the reaction. I was like, what? I was like, Darcy's not going to have a traditional reaction, is she? She's not going to freak out or anything. She's like, oh my God, thank God, this is your big secret. It's like, oh yeah, he's a dinosaur. He's like, what? No, I'm not a dinosaur. Have you seen a dinosaur? You haven't seen it? I've seen a dinosaur. I'm not a dinosaur. I'm standing here with no pants on, and that's what you're focusing on. Like, she's like, yeah, whatever. I'm behind. I'm passing on. And she's like, oh my God, thank God. And, because she was scared because it's like, oh, you're my best friend. You make me feel like, okay, like I can't move in with someone that's a liar. And it's like, oh, I was like, oh, good. And I thought that was really sweet of Harry to do that because he knows how important those connections are. He knows how important Darcy is to Asta. So he did that for her sake, too. So it's like, cool. It's out in the open. I mean, I'm sure they had to skip. How much? I mean, they explained some of the stuff. It's like, oh, the alien convention, the alien baby. But it's like, I'm sure you kind of skipped over the whole, like, yeah, the real Harry did kill Sam, and and Harry killed Harry. So that's a whole thing. So it's like, well, they're also, I guess it's also the thing of, well, he's killed Harry, and she's also killed one of those people from Glenn and Powell, so it's kind of like and Darcy helped cover that up, so I guess it's kind of a thing of like, well, we won't push and prod too much on that front, but it's like, hey, I like Darcy being brought into the fold. I'm eventually curious to see who else gets brought into the fold. I think Liv will be one of the next ones, like, especially they have to confirm, like, Liv, you're not crazy, aliens do exist. Harry's one, especially, well, I don't see them bringing the whole Sam thing back up just because they know it's like, right, Glenn and Powell has got the center of that. I don't think that's fully resolved, is it? I don't think it is. I mean, I think it's like the FBI ended up taking over that investigation. It's more of an FBI thing now, I think. But I don't know if that's done, or is there still going to be more into that. I'd also be curious to see if, like, Harry's daughter would stop by again and just, like, I'd be so fascinated to see what happens on that front, especially juggling, like, right, you had your parenthood moments with her, you also had the parenthood moments with the baby, as well as Robert, and he was like, sit down, son, I'm not your son. He's like, I'm gonna put you in timeout. He's like, I am 28 years old, and it's just like, I gotta get back to my life. It's like, I mean, I guess it's like, right, you were just hijacked from your life, because I guess in my head I was thinking like, oh, weren't you captured the entire time? It's like, well, you've had this on and off thing. It makes you wonder what is his life? Like, where is his life? Like, well, he was taken from his parents and they just, I guess, dropped him off somewhere, so he's just constantly been living his life probably on the move, constantly being taken by the Greys over the past 28 years. But I think that's so interesting, because I'm like, it's just, like I said, I was just under the impression almost like he had no life, that he was just kind of always in the Greys, like, clutches, and then maybe at the end, eventually McAllister and them got him. That's all I chalked that up to, but it's like, no. And even Harry giving him the orb to protect him, it's like, right. And kind of explaining something I kind of figured. So the energy in the orb can only be used and controlled by an alien. Otherwise, it can make it so that a human would never die. So as long a human could use it over and over and over and over again, dying and coming back without there being any repercussions, because they can never actually use the alien energy in it. Can't be, like, sapped. So I'm like, okay, I thought that was kind of a neat little, like, explanation. I kind of figured as much, considering, like, right, anytime Harry ever used one of the balls, it would immediately turn into water and disappear. He would use up the resources of it. But it's like, right, humans can't control that energy, so it's enough to bring them back to life, but it doesn't take away from the power inside of it. So it could be used over and over again, probably till infinity or something like that. So I thought that was interesting. It's like, oh, kind of making Robert immortal or something like that. Granted, sadly, at the end, he ends up getting taken by the Greys. And I was like, oh, but like the Grey ended up taking the ball, and I'm like, I wonder, are they going to end up using that or not? but then like he turns over and it's Ben beside him. I was like, oh my God. I was like, so that's why Ben's been abducted ever since he was a kid. Because I was like, I knew something was up with the fact that he was still sleepwalking. I was like, wow, so Ben and him and his wife's baby. It's like, no, Kate was pregnant, but they took the baby. And I'm like, like I said, I get this is all for the purpose of like half human, half Greys, but I'm like, so would that make, like I said, isn't Robert that to some extent, or what are they doing? Like, what are they? How many other people have they done this to? Like, if they've done it to Ben, I thought that was kind of neat too, making it happen to Ben, because I was wondering what that was going to all be about. So that's neat. Sadly, he won't remember this. Maybe not. It's just also heartbreaking, especially for Max to eventually find out, like, wait, I have a sibling that was taken by the Greys, so that's definitely going to be interesting. And then you also at the end you have Joseph showing up, and he's now going to be a deputy because Ben said like, oh, we can hire one deputy, and he gave you could get all the resources you want, but he gave him that Hot Wheels car that Max left, and it's like, oh, can I get the loop-de-loop too? It's like, I'll get that from home too. He's like, okay, deal. So that's happening, and Harry turned himself over to McAllister, and it's like, right, you kind of have to work, like, you're not really an enemy when you had the same goal, because it's like, right, we both want to stop the Greys from invading and taking over this planet. I know what the future holds for this planet if we don't work together. It's like, he didn't want to trust her because she's his enemy, she's hunting aliens, but it's like, right, we have the same goal. Truth be told, it's like all that she's done has been for the purposes of, I want to prove that aliens exist, that me and my dad aren't crazy, that my dad wasn't crazy. That's at the heart of it. So I'm curious, like, I'm assuming it's like a whole facility of just weaponry and just experimentation ready for a potential alien invasion. She's probably been preparing for this for decades, maybe. I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to find out what exactly is down there, but thought that was just kind of a wild setup and, ending to the season, but also a wild setup potentially for the future. Resident Alien has been renewed for a third season. I want to say specifically it was a Deadline article that was saying that apparently they're hearing it's going to be 12 episodes. So that's an interesting. So I'm sure the next season probably going to be, because once again the creator was saying like, yeah, this season was going to be like a slow burn. That's at least what the quote I saw, especially because this was on the longer end. So this one's obviously it's going to be closer in length to like the first season, which was I think 10 if I remember correctly. Either way, I'm excited. That's just great news to hear that this is coming back for a third season, which I was kind of, you always get nervous because you're just like, oh, it's going to like, that you just never quite know, but I'm excited for a third season because season 3 is going to be wild. There's so many storylines on so many fronts. I'm so curious to see what, like, now that Darcy knows what that's like, Liv and Mike investigating this stuff, especially because, like, once again, it's government stuff, especially tied to McAllister, which will eventually lead back to Harry in some shape or form, especially because they're working together, and what that dynamic is going to be like going forward. It's going to be interesting. Asta and the whole Jay thing. Darcy going forward with, not just the knowledge of what she knows, but also, like, what's next for her. I'm just curious, what's going to happen with Judy? Just Judy in general, her interactions with people, like what that's going to turn into. Joseph being in town. Max and Sahar, now that baby's gone, what does that mean for them? And will they have more interactions with General McAllister, even David? Obviously the Ben situation of it all, like, when will he find out? Will Asta and Harry find out about him? Or what about the Robert situation? Like, are they going to put him back after they took him this most recent time? Will they only put Ben back? So many questions. How this fight against the Greys going to turn out. Once again, how many other hybrids are on Earth just like Joseph? There's so many questions. I'm so excited to see where season 3 takes us going with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good